So what if I told you we could actually model the future? That we could use algorithms to project humanity's path right through the chaos of the AI revolution? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore today. We're diving into a fascinating projection, a 25-year journey through what these models call the technological valley of despair. It's a turbulent, pretty painful, but ultimately a hopeful story of how we just might find our way.
So, what exactly is this valley of despair? Well, you can think of it as that unavoidable, painful gap in time. It's the period where the old world, the one we all know, is collapsing way faster than the new one can be built to replace it. And the real kicker? It's the psychological shock. Most of us are just not prepared for the speed, let alone the sheer violence of this kind of change.
And that really brings us to the biggest question of this whole explainer, doesn't it? When literally everything you know gets turned upside down, when your very purpose in society feels like it's been erased, how do you get through that valley without the whole thing just tearing itself apart? Well, the model we're looking at predicts a path, a journey in 3 distinct acts.
Okay, so here's the roadmap. The model predicts that we're going to process this massive shift in 3 phases. First up, you've got the initial shock and, well, a whole lot of anger. Then comes a deep societal split called the Great Fracture. And finally, after all the dust settles, we negotiate a brand new social contract. So let's start at the very beginning with the initial shock of Act 1.
All right, let's dive into Act 1, shock and anger. And let's be clear. This part isn't about politics, it's not about philosophy, this is about a raw, visceral, human reaction to being replaced on a massive, massive scale.
So when those first huge waves of automation hit the very core of the middle class, the reaction isn't some thoughtful debate. No way, it's a frontal rejection. This is where we see the rise of what the model calls Neo-Luddite movements. We're talking about people who feel like they've been totally stripped of their social utility, and they are ready to fight back against the machines they see as the cause.
Now check this out, because this is where you see just how fast things can escalate. According to this projection, we start in 2026 with massive but peaceful mind strikes from knowledge workers. Okay, but by 2027, that peace is already over. Vandalism against AI infrastructure begins. Then, by 2029, health systems are completely overwhelmed by a wave of depression from mass unemployment. It all comes to a head in 2031 with actual riots over food and basic necessities. And that, in turn, forces governments into what's called a legislative panic by 2022, scrambling to push out the very first emergency income experiments.
Eventually, that initial violence starts to burn itself out, and that leads us to Act 2, the Great Fracture. This is the point where society stops fighting itself so much, and instead it starts splitting apart, creating 2 separate, almost hermetically sealed realities.
And this slide just illustrates that split perfectly. I mean, just imagine this. On one side, you've got the smart quarters. Think ultra-optimized cities, completely managed by AI, everything hyper-integrated. But right next door, you could have sanctuary quarters. These are zones with 0 wireless signals, no surveillance cameras, managed entirely by humans. A completely analog life, by choice.
And we're not just talking about different neighborhoods here. This becomes a full-blown analog secession. Entire communities just decide to opt out of the system. They refuse digital currencies, they refuse lab-grown food, and they refuse biometric IDs, choosing instead to create their own little micro-societies on the fringes of this hyper-modern world.
You know, what's so fascinating is that as this fracture gets deeper, society starts to adapt in some really interesting ways. During this period, we see universal basic income actually becoming a constitutional right by 2034. Then in 2036, citizens win a legal right to physical anonymity, which bans facial recognition in certain public zones. Get this, by 2039, in a huge backlash against perfection, artisans, people who make imperfect, handmade things, become society's new rock stars. And this whole chaotic decade ends with a kind of truce in the technological war. A compromise is finally reached.
And that compromise, it leads us right into our final act. Act 3, a new contract. You know, chaos can't last forever. Eventually, social exhaustion and just the basic human need for security forces everybody back to the negotiating table.
I absolutely love this quote from the source material because it just perfectly captures the spirit of this final phase. The human always ends up recreating warmth where mathematics is imposed. After all that cold, hard efficiency of the AI revolution, there's this powerful, powerful resurgence of human values.
And here's the crucial thing to understand about universal basic income. The model gives it a 95% probability of happening. But not because of some utopian political dream. No,
It's born from pure necessity. It's basically the price that governments and tech giants have to pay to buy back social peace and just restore some stability. So this new contract is built on a foundation of brand new, fundamental rights. Rights that were hard-won from all that chaos. You have the right to a basic income, just to ensure survival. You get a constitutional right to disconnect, and as we saw, the right to physical anonymity in public spaces. This is the new safety net for this new world.
So, after climbing out of that valley of despair, what does life actually look like on the other side? Well, the model calls this period the new humanism, and it's a time where society finally finds a new equilibrium because our core values have profoundly, fundamentally shifted.
And this might just be the biggest change of all. The very definition of social status gets a complete rewrite. We move from a world of value work, where your worth is tied to what you produce, to your career, to a brand new world of value care. In this world, your status is actually measured by your capacity for empathy, for listening, and for taking care of other people.
And what about the AI that caused all this chaos in the first place? It's kind of funny. By this stage, the trauma of the transition has been digested. AI stops being this scary, controversial thing. It just is. It becomes like electricity or running water. It's an essential, invisible utility that just works in the background, and it's no longer something people are passionately debating anymore.
This final timeline here really shows how the last pieces fall into place. By 2047, AI is fully and invisibly integrated. Then, in 2048, something amazing happens. Purely human clemency tribunals are created to act as a final court of appeal, a human override for algorithmic justice. By 2050, a stable post-scarcity balance is finally achieved, and that leads to the peak of this new humanism in 2051.
And so, here we are. We arrive at the new social contract, the grand compromise. It's actually a pretty clear division of labor. The machines, they're tasked with maintaining the world. Energy, food, logistics, the whole shebang. And humans, we're tasked with giving that world meaning.
Which leaves us with one final fascinating question to think about. In this projected future, by being forced to confront the perfect, logical, mathematical machine, did we ultimately end up rediscovering and re-embracing everything that makes us so wonderfully, beautifully, and imperfectly human?